Hello, my name is Connie Armstrong, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Oklahoma Center for the Book and the Oklahoma Department of Libraries. Joining me today is Mary Anna Evans. Mary Anna is a writing professor at the University of Oklahoma, and she holds degrees in physics and engineering. She is an award-winning author. Her books include the very popular Fay Longchamp Archaeological Mysteries. Her book, Catacombs, won the 2020 Oklahoma Book Award for Fiction, and she is here today to discuss her novel, The Physicist's Daughter, which won the 2023 Oklahoma Book Award for Fiction. Mary Anna, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Before I get started, I want to begin with, how did you go from a physics engineering degree into writing mystery novels? How did that process take place, and when did you decide that you wanted to become a writer?
Well, right after I published my first book, I was speaking in my hometown to the Institute of Learning and Retirement, large room full of people, my age now and older. And someone asked me when I started writing, and I was formulating my answer in my head, and two people in the audience stuck their hands up as if they wanted to answer my question for me. And it was my mother and my fourth grade teacher. So they wanted people to know that I had always been a writer. And I think they were right. When I was choosing a career in high school, I had good grades in English and math. And it seemed to me to be the practical thing to study engineering and physics as far as, getting out in the world and making my way. And that turned out to be true. I supported myself as an engineer for a number of years as a single mom. But I always wrote on the side. And even in graduate school, I audited English and writing classes because I needed the right side of my brain would get to feel like it was shriveling up when I'd go for 6 months without writing a complete sentence. Lots of numbers and Greek letters, yes, but not a sentence. So I've always had a need for both. And so all through my 20s, when I was raising my children, at times in my 20s, I taught physics at a community college. At times I worked as an environmental engineer, but then times I was a full-time mom. I was writing short stories and poetry in my spare time, not having a lot of success, published a few poems. But when I was in my early 30s, I was on bed rest for my third pregnancy. And I knew going in that there'd be 6 months of bed rest. And I still kept my engineering job part-time, but there's a lot of hours in the day. And I took a correspondence course and wrote about 3/4 of my first novel, Wounded Earth, which was a near miss with selling. It got interest, but no sale, but it also got me a Manhattan agent who I've had since 1997. And with her advice, I sold my first book, which I still had to write. I wrote another book. It's a very slow process for anybody who's looking to get started. And so from that time, which was 2003, writing has been my primary thing.
That's very interesting. Well, give our audience a brief summary of The Physicist's Daughter.
The Physicist's Daughter is about Justine Byrne. It's set in 1944. Justine, as the title will tell you, was born to two physicists, which was unusual. Her mother's PhD in physics would have been very unusual in 1944, but not unheard of. And so she was raised by people who didn't think girls were not capable of things. And so they taught her to do things like weld and repair the lawnmower and how to do calculus and things that she was not being taught at her school. But then the war came along, World War II, and her parents died in a car wreck. And so when the book opens, her parents have been dead about 2 or 3 years, and she's been supporting herself in a Rosie the Riveter kind of job. So she's building war machines, airplanes, boats, ships, and mysterious little gadgets that she's being told are radio parts. But she knows they're not, because she and her father built radios, for fun when she was a kid. And so the book starts off where she's wondering why people are lying to her about her job. And she's wondering why equipment keeps breaking and she's having to weld it back together. She suspects sabotage. And that kicks off the book, is who's trying to sabotage this war work, and who can she trust since she knows her boss is lying to her. Who can she trust with her suspicions?
What was your inspiration for writing the book?
Well, I had a vague idea in my mind that I would like to write about a woman scientist in the early to mid 20th century, but it really came together for me when I visited the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. And it was actually just a fluke that I went there. My sister and I were there, and she wanted to go, and I was afraid it would be sad, and it was sad. It was tragic, really. But I asked myself, why is this museum in New Orleans? You would expect it to be in Washington, D.C. or someplace, important to the war. Well, it turns out New Orleans was important to the war because that is where the boats that were used on D-Day, which the anniversary was yesterday, were built. There was a man who had 75 employees, and he built fishing boats for the bayous. So they could go in very, very shallow water. You could run them right up onto the bank. And he was very, he could see the future. He saw the war coming. So even before Pearl Harbor, he was talking to the Navy about, you need what I can do. And he was a very prolific inventor. He was a man for his time. Eisenhower called him the man who won the war for us. And so he had military contracts and went from 75 employees to 25,000 employees by the time of the setting of this book. And the National World War II Museum is in one of his old factories. So besides the obvious, what you're looking at when you go to the museum, I'm looking at the boats that they call them Higgins boats. His name was Higgins, and thinking, this is really interesting. If I were going to sabotage something, I would sabotage that. So I took my character I already had in mind and put her in a factory in New Orleans, building critical war machines. As I did my research, I learned about these little mysterious radio parts, which turned out to be a top secret project that were, at the end of the war, the Higgins gathered the people together, most of them women, and told them what they'd been doing. I can't tell you because it would spoil the book. But the mystery of what they called them the carbonites, because the parts were largely carbon and stainless steel. And so the women who machined the carbon would go home just covered in carbon dust every day. There's pictures of them on the internet.
Interesting.
And so and it was top secret. So they took the secret to their graves, a lot of them. Nobody told them when it was declassified. So just in time, because that generation is passing, the people at the World War II Museum started asking questions. And so I corresponded with their historian, who was able to tell me what little we do know about that secret project. And then I was able to do some, through the miracle of the internet, and also sometimes I do still use my engineering training, I was able to put together the right search string to pull up what I believe are the plans of the secret project that the carbon pieces went into. So they're now freely available on the internet. I would have been shot if I'd seen them in 1944.
Oh my, that is interesting.
It's very interesting, isn't it?
Well, tell us about how you develop your main character. Do you identify with the main character or any characters in your book, or do you create that character as your opposite? Tell us about how you develop your main character.
That's a good question. I think all of our writers' characters are them, even the evil bad ones. I think, it's not that all of us have, I don't know that I believe all of us have an evil side, but you can always ask yourself, if I had this emotional flaw and this thing happened to me, how might I respond? I don't know if you can really create somebody if you can't ask yourself that question. So there's a little tiny piece of me in even the people who seem not like me. In some ways, Justine is more like me than some of my other characters just because of the physics background. I did not have physicists for parents, but I did have parents who encouraged me to get an education and did not discourage me when I surprised them by studying physics and engineering. My father said, I always expected you to be an English professor. And here I am teaching writing at OU. But I got there the long way around, and he didn't live to see that he was right. So I had parents who thought, did not think. I was born in the 1960s in Mississippi, and I think it might have been unusual that they encouraged me as much as they did in my studies. And so I'm very grateful for that. But so I think my characters frequently, my protagonists, think like me. They tend to be very logical people, even if they're not scientists. And that's what, when people ask me what I bring from the sciences to my writing, my go-to answer is a deeply ingrained sense of cause and effect. So when I have a problem with that plot, I go, well, why did he do that? And if I can't answer that, then I haven't done my work. And I take that into my teaching, because I'll come to something that doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'll ask my student, tell me why this happened. Tell me why that character did that. And then that helps them know what they need to go back and fix.
That kind of segue into my next question. Can you describe briefly your writing process? Do you outline first? Do you plot and plan? Or is your writing more organic?
I definitely believe in outlining, and I teach that too. My process has streamlined a little bit over the years, and I also think I trust intuition a little bit more than I did in the beginning. When you write the first book, you're not sure you can finish it. What if the story peters out at page 110 and it's too long for a short story and too short for a novel, and there's nothing to do with it. And so my first book, it was really more than an outline. It was like I would type chapter 1 and then just type everything that needed to happen in it. And I might have bits of dialogue that needed to go in there. I might have research that I'd done on the internet and copied into there. Whereas chapter 2 might just say, she finds a skull, because I know that that's the important thing, and I don't need any more to write that chapter. So 33 chapters of that was 125 pages of an outline, which some people might call the world's ugliest first draft. At some point, if there's a blurriness to, and so people who say they don't outline, they may just write really ugly first drafts, and they may spend more time in editing than people that outline in a detailed way. Since I've been teaching, my colleagues have taught me some outlining methods, plotting methods that have really helped me a lot. And so I'm able to pass that on to my students. But some of it is always intuitive. Some of it just comes from reading a lot. I always tell people who want to write, you have to read, because you have this sense of, you'll read your draft and you'll go, something needs to happen right there, and you don't get that unless you've read a lot of good fiction.
What do you enjoy most about writing fiction books?
Oh, wow. Just creating a world, creating people, especially when you write a series character. The second Justine book just came out yesterday. So I'm now 2 books into my relationship with Justine. I wrote 13 books with Faye Longchamp as the protagonist. And it got to where she felt like she sat on my shoulder and whispered stories in my ear. I knew what Faye would think about things and how she would do things and how she would relate to people. And so that is, when you feel like you've created something that's real to you, it's very rewarding, and you can hope that it feels real to your reader.
Do you have a particular space that you like to write, maybe in your house or your office, or do you have any habits that you adhere to as you write?
I do have an office. It's behind me, actually. It's small. There's really not much in there, but bookshelves and a recliner. And so I usually write there, but because, really all I need is a laptop. Sometimes I write in a recliner in the living room. I have been known to prop myself up in bed a little bit, but I really feel more businesslike when I'm in my office. I wrote my first 3 books at a desk in a different house, but in an office. And I had some chronic pain issues that I really couldn't have finished the 3rd book if I didn't move to the recliner. I had surgery. That's all fixed. I'm fine now. But once I learned that I did not have to sit at a desk, I was like freed. And so it's almost like I tell people who want to write, you really if you can write every day, write every day. Everybody can't. I can't always. But if you set what psychologists call a conditioned response, and so when I pick up my computer, I sit in that chair, I probably have a Coke I'm not supposed to drink right next to me, and I sit down and open the computer. It's like the stories that have been piling up while I didn't have time to write start to come.
Very good. Well, tell us about your readers. Do you ever get any feedback from your readers, and does that affect your writing in any way?
I do get feedback. You know, I've been doing this for 20 years. So social media came along as I've been publishing. So when I first published, I only heard from people if they emailed me, which I did. I think even in that era, we heard more from writers than writers just a few years from readers. Just a few years earlier, they would have had to send paper, you know, and no, people probably didn't do that. I think in my career, I probably have gotten paper fan mail that you could count on one or two hands, but I hear regularly from readers by email. But once social media came along, I probably have some contact with somebody every day, even if it's just liking their post or them liking my post, or that's, you know. So yeah, the internet has been a blessing in many ways. I don't know how we could possibly write historical fiction without access to the internet. My hats off to people who did that in the 20th century and before, because I can just type in a search string and pull up secret plans from 1944, or I can Google. You know, there's a restaurant in the Physicists' Daughter. No, it's actually in the new one, the Trader beside her. There's a Washington, D.C. restaurant that I was able to get a picture of it and the menu. So I could make it really, really, really real.
As a former history teacher, that's really intriguing to me, talking about all these secret plans and everything.
Yeah.
But, what advice would you give to anyone who wanted to start a career as an author or wanted to write a novel? What advice would you give?
Okay, well, you know, it's I guess I have multiple advice, but you can do it all simultaneously. You know, I always tell people to read. So, you know, but if you're getting started, decide what you want to write so that you can read something similar, so you know what's being published right now, and you know who's publishing it. So that's a form of research. And then I would, you know, I wouldn't hesitate to just get started. I had fewer resources because it was pre-internet when I got started. I ordered some books on how to write, and those are always useful. But there's no substitute for just sitting down and starting. If you are like me and like to plan, you can write yourself. I write it these days in paragraph form. I just tell myself a story, and about 25 pages of that gets me a book, you know. So that's my working outline. So I would suggest you do that, and then I would suggest you just go. And then if you have questions, then you go to the internet, or you go to a library, or you I took a correspondence course through Writer's Digest when I was getting started. So you have a lot of resources. And so I think the main thing would be the willingness to use the resources, and not be embarrassed or afraid of doing that. And then the willingness to write something that's a little cruddy at first, because you can fix it. You can't fix nothing.
Right.
You can. I still feel like I'm improving. So start where you are. Yeah.
You mentioned the public library. Can you tell us a little bit about the role the public library has had in your life, maybe as a child?
Oh my goodness.
Growing up.
Yeah, when I was a child, we mostly used the bookmobile. I remember going to the physical public library a few times and thinking it was very cool. It was one of those Carnegie libraries from the mid-century. But mostly we went to the bookmobile. My mother and sister and I would go once a week all summer, and we would both get our maximum. I think my sister and I could get 4 books and my mother could get 10, and we'd pass them around between us, and they would last the week, and then we'd go back. And I remember, and I've written about this, the smell of the ink that they used to use to check things out. And it was Mississippi, it was July, it was really hot in the parking lot, and the bookmobile doors would open and this blast of air conditioning would come out. Also, I could still tell you where on the shelf some of my favorite authors were in the bookmobile.
That's awesome. I too visited our local bookmobile quite a bit here in Oklahoma City.
Mhm.
This year, the National Book Festival's theme is Books Bring Us Together. How do you think your book, The Physicist's Daughter, brings people together?
Oh, well, I think reading and writing are acts of empathy. And it's, I think there's been research that people who read have more empathy because you have the experience of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes who could be very, very different from you. And in a book, you can be in the shoes of quite a number of people. So even if the protagonist is just like you, that her best friend won't be. So I think that books bring us together, and then they bring us together in a more literal way because we talk about them. I have book friends, and oh, have you read this one? And what do you think? And so this author's got a new book out, and it brought my family together because we, like I said, my mother and I and I wrote about an archaeologist dating back because when I was a kid, we'd go to the bookmobile and get books about the pharaohs, and we'd all read them. And so that books have been a defining part of my life. And that's related to one bit of writing advice that I always give that I did not give just now, is that when you sit down to write, whatever quality your first draft is, the thing to remember is, and I tell my students, if they want to, they can tape this above their computer, make them feel something is my best advice for a writer. And that could be fiction or nonfiction. If they feel something because of what you wrote, they will turn the page and they will connect to you. It brings you and your reader together. If it's dry and not relatable, then they'll go to somebody else's book.
Let's see. I know you're writing all the time, but are you currently reading anything just for fun?
I am. I just started Winter Counts, and I've been practicing the man's name. He has 4 of them, so let me see if I can get them all right. David Heska Wombley Whedon, I believe is his name. And actually he has pronunciation on his website. But I believe he's Lakota, and the book is set on a reservation in the Dakotas. And it's won or been nominated for many, many, many awards. And I discovered him because I was teaching a mystery writing class this spring, and we got the best mystery stories of 2022 and read those and he had a story in there that was wonderful. So I'm about 3 chapters into it, so it's early, but it really grips you on the first page.
Mariana, you told us that you have a new book out. What is the name of that book?
It's called The Traitor Beside Her. It came out just yesterday on D-Day, which I thought was very cool. It continues Justine Burns' story, and she has gotten a job as working undercover for an espionage agency. And so they have sent her to work among the code breakers in Washington, D.C. And again, by 1944, most of them were women. And so there's a nonfiction book called Code Girls that I recommend about these women that really, they had a big hand in winning the war with breaking the codes. So I read that book, and I decided the story I wanted to tell was that in real life, there was a section called the German section that had the most brilliant code crackers, and they were really eccentric people. You might walk in there and find out that somebody had taken off his clothes because he got them wet, and come in, very eccentric people, but brilliant and critical to the war effort. And I thought, well, what if we found out that one of them was a spy, but we didn't know who? And these are the most valuable people we've got. So you'd have to root that spy out. So I send Justine undercover into that room to figure out which one it is. So in a way, it was reviewed in the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago, and the Washington Post called it a closed room mystery, similar to Agatha Christie, which I didn't actually think of it that way myself, but because it's not a locked room mystery, people come in and out of it, but it is a very, like as Christie wrote, a closed circle of suspects. And so I send my sleuth into this closed circle of suspects to find out which one is selling secrets, because none of them can be used until then. And it's the eve of the Battle of the Bulge, and they're badly needed. So it's December 1944, which is when the Battle of the Bulge started.
Well, congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
For people who are interested in following, do you have a website?
I do. It's very easy. My website is marianaevans.com. On Twitter, I'm at Mariana Evans. On Facebook, I'm Mariana Evans author. If I'd been Mary Ann Evans, I couldn't have gotten all these things. But that second A makes my name unusual enough that it's hard for me to hide.
Well, Mary Anna, I want to thank you for joining us today. Again, the book is titled The Physicists' Daughter. And again, it won the 2023 Oklahoma Book Award for fiction. And thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your writing experiences with us.
Thank you, Connie.